So I had to laugh the other day. I was watching something, and Carl Froch came out with. It was they were talking about the Conor Ben Eddie Hearn fiasco, and Carl Froch came out with, "If you want loyalty, buy a Labrador." And of course, the original quote, which I personally think was the most iconic, certainly the most poignant, maybe most notable quote in, I want to say sporting history, but it's certainly boxing history. But it was said by that guy there, and he said, "If you want loyalty, buy a dog." And the truth was, um, I mean, I spoke to, I think I used 50 interviews for that book, and I spoke to 76 people in total for that book. Some I couldn't use, some um, it wouldn't have been right to use. Some were raging, spitting feathers. Mickey Duff wasn't their favourite person. But overall, I like to think I kind of got that book. It was done respectfully, and I wasn't. It certainly wasn't a Mickey Duff fan book because there's things in that book not very nice about him, which is just what kind of person he was. But obviously there was, and the two people cried in front of me because they obviously absolutely loved him. But yeah, I think that quote will be forever. And sorry, the point to that, I was told, and then I checked some up on the archives. And he was talking about a middleweight boxer who was given him all kinds of contract problems. And I do remember talking to Peter De Freitas, Nigel Benn's manager, and he said to him, never fall in love with a fighter. But yeah, overall, I mean, as I said, when people say that, if you Google that image, so if you type it in, his name will come up. And I think it's widely recognised that that's his quote. And he was very true. And yeah, dogs, he knew it. And he gave off another quote as well. Sorry, dog. He said another thing as well when it was a middleweight again. I'm not going to name him, but he said he's a bar steward, but he's my bar steward. I could have did a book alone on Mickey Duff quotes, and I think I did put in that book that there was a book which is called The World's Greatest Come Downs. Sorry, The World's Greatest Put Downs. And there's two. I mean, there's some horrific things in there. Where you want to mock and humiliate someone and kind of kill them with wit and there's two Mickey Duff sayings in that book, which is the greatest ever put downs. But yeah, if you want loyalty by dog, um, yeah, that sounds much better. Carl Froch, if you want loyalty, get a Labrador. It's a bit naff and it's a bit watered down. And of course, we all know who said it. And I think it's it's very hard hitting because of him. And you know what? I think we could all do with in life being a little bit more like him. People want to be liked, and we worry about stressing out. And he just didn't care. He and certainly if you had that kind of thinking in life, and just he didn't want to enter any popularity contests in life. He was there, done it to do a job. I read. I'm always reading comments lately. Obviously, I've got many social media pages, and when I put them out, people always go, "Oh yeah, and he ripped this boxer off, and he ripped that boxer off," and yeah, he was a money mad, and you know, he didn't really, as far as I'm concerned, Duff didn't really wasn't a massive drinker. I've spoke to dozens upon dozens of people now, really close to him. Some all kinds of emotions, and I never really got feedback that he was a womanizer. I think what he did was he was very private. He was obviously a gambler. I don't think I defy anyone out there to say he was a really wealthy man. I personally think he was, but he was that private. And I remember talking to Jump McKenzie, and he said, "Well, I don't know," because he just didn't tell me. I dare say maybe only his son would know that, and but I think in Mickey Duff's defence, he lived a life, and he was married to boxing, and he wasn't out taking drugs, he wasn't out falling out of nightclubs and womanizing, and so if he lived and his put all his energy into building his empire, which of course I personally think British boxing owes Mickey Duff a lot. I think he was like a pioneer of the game, which I've said it before, and I'm not going to go on about it. I think I even put it in that book. But he didn't, as I said, you read all boxers' lives and they're wasting this money, and they're driving cars, and they've got different women, and they've got big watches and Gucci suits and all that. Duff was never about that. Falling out of the Ivy nightclub, and he did like his fancy restaurants, but he worked hard for it, and why shouldn't he? But yeah, I personally think he was a very wealthy man, and everything he had, he worked for. You're talking about someone who, moved here in 1938, 8-year-old, and really to avoid Adolf Hitler. And I know I spoke to one of his. I don't know if I spoke with Gary, his son, and he said, "Well, I'm not sure he was brought up in poverty." And I'm like, "Look, if you're brought up in Hanbury Street during the 1940s, which is where Jack the Ripper killed people, and the old Jewish East End, and yes, there was other parts of London that was poverty, but it was still very much slums. Obviously not. It got on much more from the 1888 Jack the Ripper days, and Queen Victoria. After that, London changed a lot because there was lights, and and yes, those women had to die, but I think London changed for the better, certainly in the early part of the century. But I still overall think that if you've grown up in Spitalfields and Brick Lane, and maybe dragged up is not the wrong word to use, but that's as hard as to come. And a lot of people forget that Duff was this guy in a suit and made the money and that, but he did everything. Of course, a boxer, manager, promoter, trainer, everything in boxing, professional boxer himself, amateur boxer, but also he was a tough mother. You get the point. And anyone who can be brought up and, as I said, I want to say dragged up, but anyone who can live and grow up in that concrete jungle, that environment, you've got to have a. I personally think that you would end up a really tough person, and I think a lot of Mickey Duff's hardness and that maybe even a little bit of nastiness came from his beginning. And also, you've got to remember that the Jewish people, I know there was so many of them. I remember Barry Hearn telling me, he said they weren't treated very nice, and you'd think with that, in hindsight, there would have been more Jewish boxers, and there was quite a lot back then. But predominantly the Jewish people went into the rag trade, or they become a cabinet maker, or so yeah, they certainly had to fight for what they got, and he was one of them. And fair play to him. As I said, I personally think everything he ever got. Mickey Duff lived in Dog Behave. Mickey Duff lived in Great Cumberland Place. Now, Madonna lived in that street. There's there's one or two others as well. So basically, you know, he's came from Hanbury Street. A dog's fighting the other one, and like, but he's brought up in Hanbury Street, and he's ended up on a street full of millionaires. So I think, you know, I think he was a huge success. And I'll leave the video with a quote that Mickey Duff said: "If I had to do my life all over again, I would do the exact same thing." That's what he said in his 1999 biography, 20 and Out. But of course, if you want to read kind of what went on after that, and obviously it's been 12 years now, over 12 years since his death, and then you can read that. I will put the link for that book. Don't forget, every book we sell from Amazon, £1 goes to the Jewish Nightingale Care Home, which looked after not only Mickey Duff, but Ted Kid Lewis. Was it Ted Kid Lewis? Or was it Ted Kid Berg? I get mixed up, you know. But you get the point. Died 1970. In fact, they named a ward after him, which I think Mickey was even on it. But yeah, anyone who fancies that book, click on the bio. And yeah, I just think, you know, overall, I think that Labrador comment is just a bit soft and a bit naff. But we all know where it came from.